You can hear me? Okay,
Uh,
start.
okay, I should begin? Yes? Very good. A pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to Darwin Day. I'm going to speak today about a very basic issue on the evolution of human intelligence. It was raised by Alfred Russel Wallace, the co-discoverer with Darwin of the theory of natural selection. And Wallace posed a problem that still remains with us today, and I will quote from him. Our law, our government, and our science continually require us to reason through a variety of complicated phenomena to the expected result. Even our games, such as chess, compel us to exercise all these faculties in a remarkable degree. A brain one half larger than that of the gorilla would have sufficed for the limited mental development of the savage, and we must therefore admit that the large brain he actually possesses could never have been solely developed by any of those laws of evolution, whose essence is that they lead to a degree of organization exactly proportionate to the wants of each species, never beyond those wants. That is, what did hunter-gatherers, our evolutionary ancestors, do with those big brains capable of playing chess and studying physics and doing math, given that they had no use for those activities? Natural selection, Wallace continued, could only have endowed savage man with a brain a few degrees superior to that of an ape, whereas he actually possesses one very little inferior to that of a philosopher. A superior intelligence, he concluded, has guided the development of man in a definite direction and for a special purpose. That is, Wallace, when it came to the human mind, was a creationist. He believed that natural selection was not sufficient to explain the evolution of human intelligence, and it had to be God who endowed us with a human mind. Well, his co-discoverer, Charles Darwin, needless to say, was not happy with this conclusion, and he wrote to Wallace saying, "I hope that you have not murdered too completely your own and my child." This is a puzzle. Why are humans so smart? I'm going to try to answer that in a way that I think would have pleased Darwin and that does not require divine intervention of a cosmic engineer, namely God. I'm going to suggest two things: that humans evolved to fill the cognitive niche in nature. That is, we evolved to manipulate the environment through causal reasoning and social cooperation. I'll also suggest that a process of metaphorical abstraction allows cognitive mechanisms that were adapted to physical reasoning to apply to abstract domains. That will be the rest of my talk today. The idea of the cognitive niche comes from the late evolutionary psychologist John Tooby and his advisor Irv DeVore. And it begins with the observation that organisms evolve at each other's expense, that every food item that an animal consumes is the body part of some other organism, which would just as soon keep that body part to itself. And so we have coevolutionary arms races where prey species develop defenses against being eaten, such as speed and camouflage and armor and poisons. Plants also have to defend themselves. They can't very well defend themselves through their behavior, so plants engage in chemical warfare, and they evolve uh, bitter toxins and bitter tasting substances in their tissues to deter herbivores from eating them. Well, this just leads to in the case of plants, to the herbivores developing methods to defeat the toxins. They evolve livers to detoxify plant toxins. Predators develop sharper eyesight, greater speed, sharper talons and fangs, and the coevolutionary arms race results in more and more complex offenses and more complex defenses. Now, these races are played out in evolutionary time. There's a speed limit measured in generations. But one way of thinking about what makes human evolution special is that we fill the cognitive niche. That is, we overtake other organisms' defenses by cause and effect reasoning. We have mental models of the environment which allow us to manipulate it, to defeat other organisms, such as tools and traps. We extract the poison from one organism and use it to uh, uh, poison the tip of an arrow or a spear. We extract medicines from plants. We extract drugs, we meaning the species. We figure out ways of detoxifying plants by cooking and fermenting and drying. We also engage in cooperative action. We accomplish things working together that no human could accomplish by himself. For example, a bunch of hunters may fan out over the landscape and make a lot of noise to crowd animals toward the edge of a cliff where they can easily dispatch them. One person couldn't scare an animal to a local area, but a group of people acting together could do that. Um, and that requires reciprocity. That is, one person helps a second in exchange for being helped in the long run, or just coordinating action, deciding to show up all at the same time, at the same place, and to work together, such as in driving game. Now, our species kind of had an unfair advantage compared to other organisms. That is, once we had the cognitive mechanisms to figure out how to outsmart other animals, we could experiment and try things in our own lifetime faster than the animals can evolve defenses in response, because they have to wait until natural selection feeds on natural variation for the most skilled escapers, but we can outsmart them because we can do it month by month, week by week, hour by hour. The theory of the cognitive niche from Toopi and DeVore helps explain a large number of zoologically unusual features of Homo sapiens. We are primates, but we are very, very weird primates in a number of regards, and they argue that the theory of the cognitive niche explains them all. These are features that are either unique to humans or at least very, very developed in humans compared to other primates. Of course, technological know-how. We make complex tools like bows and arrows. We cook and ferment meat. We extract drugs from plants and animal tissues. We have an unusual degree of cooperation among non-kin. In most animal species, cooperation only occurs among blood relatives who share genes, and therefore a gene for helping a relative is helping a copy of itself inside that relative. That's pretty much why most animals cooperate at all. We humans don't have to uh, cooperate only with people that we're related to. We form coalitions, we form alliances. Now, this is, as I'm sure many of you know, because it's been made famous since 1976 when Richard Dawkins published his book, The Selfish Gene. To get cooperation to take place among animals that are not related to each other requires very complex cognitive abilities for this reciprocal altruism. You have to recognize individuals, that is, they distinguish fellow humans. You have to remember what they did to you, not just that they were one person is nice and another person is not nice, but 2 weeks ago he loaned me some food or helped take care of my children. And there are emotions of reciprocity, emotions like sympathy, gratitude, anger, guilt, and trust that allow reciprocal altruism to take place. And a third thing that we have that makes us very unusual, indeed unique, is language. That is, we are the only species that has grammatical language. Language is a creative combinatorial system. We don't just have a fixed list of utterances, but we have a mental algorithm, mental rules that combine words in different orders and that therefore allow us to convey an infinite number of new ideas. Language conveys who did what to whom, what and what is where. It allows us to share expertise. If I discover a trick to making a tool or extracting a poison, it doesn't die with me, but I can explain it to someone else. We can negotiate social contracts. If I take care of your child, will you join me tomorrow in the hunt? And we can coordinate an action. Let's, the 15 of us, fan out over the landscape and all make noise to drive animals over a cliff. Language allows us to do all of those things. We occupy a wide range of habitats. Humans may be found in the Arctic, in deserts, in rainforests, in pretty much every zone on the planet Earth. We have an amazingly varied diet. We eat plants, we eat animals, including meat, which is a highly concentrated source of protein and calories. We have very long childhoods. We uh, spend most of our lives either being children or raising children, unusually among primates. Presumably, this is an apprenticeship, a long learning period to acquire all of the cognitive skills of one's culture before one sets out on one's own as an adult and someone that seeks mates. We have biparental care. In most mammals, the males do not have any role in child rearing. We have dads, fathers who invest in their children, presumably because the survival of a child is so demanding, because a child has to acquire so much skill, so much knowledge, that it takes two parents to have a child that acquires all of the expertise of a culture. We have very complex sexuality and long-term mating. It's not a single arrangement like gorillas, but we have monogamy, we have polygamy, we have polyandry, we have many arrangements that are often negotiated and subject to rules. We occupy 5,000 different cultures, each speaking a different language, each with different skills, presumably because humans depend on acquired knowledge. And naturally, two human groups who lose contact will each develop their own set of skills and norms, and that means we get different cultures. Well, it raises the question, why us? Why did a particular species of primate starting around 6 million years ago go on this special path of filling the cognitive niche? Why are so few animals, basically none, uh, able to survive by complex tools transmitted via language and cooperative action? Now, it's not that high intelligence is a general goal of evolution. There was a common belief in the 19th century, sometimes called orthogenesis, evolution in a direction, that humans are somehow the pinnacle of evolution and that all organisms are kind of trying harder and harder to become humans until we succeeded. Now, that doesn't make any sense. That's not Darwin's theory. The thing about intelligence is it requires a big brain, and big brains have costs as well as benefits. The costs include metabolic expense. Our brains are 2% of our body weight, but take up about 20% of our oxygen and glucose. Having a big head means that childbirth is dangerous and painful, and it means that the size of the human pelvis is wider than it has to be for optimal locomotion in order that a baby's head can go through. It means that we're vulnerable to accidents and disease. People can get brain damage from falls because we've got this big bobblehead that's sort of poised on this delicate little neck, making us vulnerable to disease. And so the question is not uh, why did other organisms not evolve our intelligence, but why did a particular species of primate evolve our intelligence? What would shift it so that the benefits of the cognitive niche outweigh the costs of a big brain? And we don't know the answer, but here are some suggestions. One is we have hands. That means that if we're smart, we have something practical to do with our intelligence. Together with the fact that we are bipedal, which means we don't have to walk on our hands the whole time, but they're free to carry tools and weapons and to fashion tools and weapons. So that may have been a precondition. The fact that we and presumably our ancestors, common human and chimp ancestor, ate meat, which is as I mentioned, a concentrated form of protein and fat. The fact that most species of primates live in groups, which means that we have the opportunity to learn from our fellows and coordinate action. And perhaps even the fact that we evolved from arboreal ancestors that swung through trees, and um, the that gives us a third dimension that we have to think about and plan. And there's some evidence that organisms that move in three dimensions, as opposed to just hugging the ground, develop greater intelligence. Those are some speculations. Now, a crucial thing about the cognitive niche is that several of the different features, in fact, probably all of them, evolve together because each one multiplies the values of the other. Language transmits structured information. That's what language is good at doing. And a crucial property of information is that it can be duplicated without loss. There's an expression in English: if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And this is a feature of information. It's a non rival good. That is, if I give you information, it's not as if I no longer have it. Not like giving you a banana, in which case I no longer have it. So language multiplies the benefit of know-how, of learned skills. It doesn't just help me, but I can share it with other people. And when I share it, I don't even lose it. Um, there's a low cost of acquisition. I can benefit from other people's trial and error. And once acquired, it's not just useful to me, but I can offer it as a trade good. So, and we know from the mathematical logic of reciprocal altruism that it only works when there are things to be exchanged that can confer a high benefit to others at a low cost to oneself. And that is definitely true of information, which we can share by language. Language requires social cooperation. Uh, we, if everyone just lied and manipulated everyone else, we would just cover our ears. So we have in English the idiom on speaking terms, which literally just means speaking, but figuratively means we cooperate. Uh, and Language then obviously facilitates cooperation because it gives people reasons to interact with each other. Namely, there's all this information to share, not just physical objects, but information. We can trade not just now. I give you a knife, you give me a chicken, but I can give you something now and you can return it in a year, and we can negotiate that with language. So the hypothesis is that language, know-how, and sociality were each selection pressures for the other, and that they co-evolved in a mutually reinforcing spiral. Okay, let me uh, offer part two of the solution to Wallace's problem. This still doesn't explain how we can do philosophy and physics and theology and chess. So how could cognitive mechanisms selected for physical and social reasoning have enabled Homo sapiens to engage in abstract reasoning? Here's a clue from language. This is the area that I originally specialized in. And that is that without realizing it, we use space as a metaphor for more abstract topics. I'm going to give examples in English, and I'd be curious for you to think if the same thing happens in Persian. I suspect that it does. So, for example, if I said the messenger went from Paris to Istanbul, well, that's movement in space. But I can also say the inheritance went to Fred, where it could just be in paper or a computer account. Nothing actually physically moved, but I use the same word go, went in English. I could say the traffic light went from green to red, where it just changed state. Again, no motion. Or the meeting went from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Here I'm using a verb of motion in English, go, went, for time. We also use force as a metaphor, pushing something. Now, Rose forced the door to open. That's physical. That's just physical force. But I can also say Rose forced Sadie to go, where this doesn't necessarily mean that Rosie grabbed Sadie and physically forced her. It could just mean she convinced her, persuaded her, or threatened her. Or Rosie even forced herself to go, where it's almost as if one part of the mind is applying physical pressure to another part of the mind. Now, these metaphors are very pervasive, certainly in English, and I suspect in Persian. And they're very useful because if I have a way of um, talking about extending or stretching position in space, motion, I can talk about the value of a variable. Uh, and that supports propositional inferences, logic, thinking. Uh, Here's a fact about physical motion. If A moves from X to Y, it is now at Y, but was not at Y in the past. That's something that I can say about anything that moves. Now, it's also true that if A is given by John to Mary, it is now owned by Mary, but was not in the past. The logical structure of thinking about motion can be carried over to think about possession and other areas where we use space metaphorically. Similarly, force is used as uh, a general way that we can talk about any kind of causation, not just physical pushing. So, and that supports counterfactual inferences, another crucial logical ability in talking about anything. Now, here's a fact about physical force. If A forces B to move to Y, then if A hadn't forced it, B would still be at X. That's just a fact about pushing things. Um, Now, but it's also true that if John forced Mary to be polite to Sam, that if John hadn't forced her, she would not be polite. Once again, we can carry over a way of thinking from physical domain, in this case force, to an abstract domain, any kind of causation. Now, the value of a variable, how we metaphorically use space, causation of change, how we metaphorically use force, are basic elements of scientific thinking. Scientific theories are stated in terms of variables and causation. Also, we aren't just stuck with simply moving and forcing, but we can even combine them. Again, I will use an English example. When we talk about communication, we often use the metaphor of a container without even realizing it. So, where ideas are spoken about as if they were objects, sentences as containers, communication as sending. For example, uh, we gather our ideas to put them into words, and if our verbiage is not empty or hollow, we might get these ideas across to a listener who can unpack our words to extract their content. Again, I'd be curious if there are similar expressions in Persian. But it's as if when I speak to you, I take an idea, I put it in a box, I give you the box, you take the box, you open the box, you take out the idea. Um, Now, this of course is just a fact about the dictionary about the language. Do we actually think about these metaphors when we speak? There's some evidence that we do, and this comes from studies of the kinds of errors that children make. Again, these are English examples, but one child says, "I put it part of the sleeve blue, so I crossed it out with red." Now, in English, you can't say "put it blue." You can say I made it blue, but put has to involve physical location. But the child is spontaneously extending physical motion to change of state. Can I have any reading behind the dinner? Again, you can't say that in English, but the child said it using space as a metaphor for time. Or my dolly is scrunched from someone, but not from me. In English, we would say by me, not from me. But from is again a spatial term, and the child just spontaneously thinks of causation as if it was like motion. Um, there's Actually, I'm going to skip this. There's evidence that adults too um, use language in metaphorically creative ways. Is this theory testable? I'll just throw out an idea that we do know that G, general intelligence, um, is indeed in other animals related to traits that are true, that are concentrated in humans: carnivory, extended childhoods, group living, and brain size. This is a general uh, law of nature. We know that G, that is general intelligence, is highly heritable, so it suggests that it indeed has been a target of recent selection, and studies of the statistical distribution of genes suggest that yes, genes for intelligence have been selected. And we also know that analogical reasoning uh, of the metaphors that I have mentioned is a major component of intelligence. A lot of intelligence tests have sections on analogies, like tree is to seed as bird is to, the correct answer is egg. That highly correlates with intelligence. So, to sum up, I've suggested that human intelligence arose as an adaptation to the cognitive niche, that is, the use of cause and effect reasoning to defeat the fixed defenses of other organisms, to coordinate behavior with other humans. That I've suggested that know how, language, and sociality co evolved as adaptations to this niche, that this helps explain many zoologically unusual features of Homo sapiens, and that metaphorical abstraction via analogy allowed our concrete intelligence to be applied to abstract domains supporting abstract inference. And that's why I agree with Darwin. I do not agree with Wallace that the theory of natural selection is sufficient to explain human abstract intelligence. We do not have to appeal to a divine creator. Thank you.
Thank you very much,